Hello, I'm Dan, this is Geekery Labs. Okay, this is just a quick video on the Razor Crest project. So here we have the port side wing of the Razor Crest with the engine, and taking this thing apart is a royal beast. So the way this disassembles is I've already got the panels that are meant to come off removed. This panel here just has these screws holding it on. It's not essential to take this off in order to get it apart, but I like to just to get that out of the way. So I've got those screws out already. Then this piece will lift out. These two screws right here keep this part together. It's not necessary to dismantle it unless you have a specific purpose to do so. But okay, so here is the engine. Now the two ends have to come off first before you can actually split the main housing. The way this works is that now that I've had the back end off, it pops off fairly easily now. There's going to be some sealing of the joint by the paint. Now, the camera might be picking up there's some markings along in here because you have to pry these pieces off initially. So now I should be able to just pop that off. And you can see all the paint scarring from having to pry it. The way this works is that both the front and the back have this collar piece in here. These bits that come forward are sloped inwards, and then those are grabbed by the lip right there. So there's just a little flat surface right there which catches underneath that. So what you're doing is you're having to force the piece up and past that to unlock it. Once you do it the first time, at least on the back half, it just pops off again and it's not a big deal. I've not had too much difficulty with the backs. If all you're doing is a basic mod to where you're, say, adding a tea light or something like that, a basic LED to the back thruster, this might be all you need, is just get that off. There is some room in there. There's a little bit of space between this and the inside of the thruster to where you can put a small light in there and then snap that back on. Then, you know, to turn it off, I assume you'd want to pop that off again. But you can also open this up right here and then have more wiring going in. That's how I'm going to do it. One thing that you can do if it winds up being stiff getting it back off is to take some sort of a sanding implement and just sand down these four wide flanges here, and those will then not grip onto this quite as well. I would also think that sanding this part here so that way it doesn't have quite as sharp as a lip, if that's a little bit sloped, where it's enough that it'll still grab hold of that and hold it in place, but not hold it as strongly. But that's the back. The front works the same way, but it is far more tenacious to get off. I've gotten the front off on both wings now, but in doing so, I have had to break it. Whenever this came off, you can see the amount of paint scarring and damage that I had to do in order to get this thing off of there. It is just an absolute beast to get that pried off, because this lip right here holds on to that collar so tightly that whenever I got it off, see, this was snapped down over that, and I'm not going to snap it all the way because then it'll be a problem prying it off again. But whenever I did get it off, what happened is that these four standoffs actually completely broke off and remained in here. The collar stayed attached to the engine. So what I then did is I just epoxied these back on. I've got some UV curing epoxy that I put on there, and it's holding tight. So what I'm going to do in the future, the epoxy is not going to be stressed at all, because that's just going to be a standoff. If I wanted to, I could go without even gluing these back on. I took a drill, I opened up these holes. The original screws, like this, went through and they actually held onto these posts and screwed down into the front of the housing here. And so if I take out those parts, you can see the posts here where the screws go into. So what I'm going to do instead, like I've done on the other engine, is that I drilled out these posts to be wider, because it's just going to be a standoff now, and I got some longer screws and then put a washer on it, and that now goes in to the post here. So this is still screwed together in the exact same way it was, but now it's just, you know, a little different configuration. I can now take this apart and repaint everything. What I would recommend doing with this is to take a sanding sponge or a file and just sand away some of this material here. And just take your time, get that worked down, so that way this won't be in quite as tightly. It needs to come out a little bit. And then I'm also going to sand this as well, because I want this to be able to do the same as the rear. I want to be able to snap that on, but then with a little pressure it'll just pop it back off again. Then once the front and back are off, now we can take the rest of the engine apart without much difficulty. I do recommend getting a screwdriver that has a long shaft to it, because I normally have the type that are just a bit that fits into a socket on the screwdrivers, but those don't go down far enough. So these are just 5 regular Phillips head screws. All the screws on these wings so far have been identical, so there's no other sizing to deal with. It's all one size of screw for all the parts that I've found so far. And the wings are the only parts that I have disassembled thus far. I haven't done anything on the body yet. Those will get their own videos, but I've spoken with some folks who were asking about the engines, and so I'm making this to hopefully make this an easier time for anybody else who's trying to dismantle this. And hopefully someone out there can figure out a way to get these popped off without breaking it and without scarring this up so bad. You know, in here it doesn't matter, because that's going to be covered up by the part. But, you know, the outside of this cowling here is scarred up. I wound up breaking a piece of the paneling here. It's just looks bad. Now, fortunately, this is a weathered ship, so I'm not honestly all that concerned about it. I'll probably sand a little bit of this so it's not quite so obvious. But the weathering and painting and all that will probably help, you know, cover a lot of that up as well. So now I've got those screws out of there. So now we can just separate the engine halves. And like I said, the paint actually has been acting as a glue for a lot of this. So there was that. The little orange indicator under here is just a little clear place held in by a very similar mechanism. It's just the 4 little clips there that are holding it in. So, and I can tell by putting my finger over it that light does shine through it. So if you wanted to light this, it can be totally possible to use what's already there. If you don't want to replace that with, or try and find an orange LED bulb that'll fit, just use what's already here. Because if you light this, it should just carry through. It's not like it's a spotlight, it's just an indicator. So lighting this piece on the inside and just letting that light kind of, illuminate this bulb here would probably work out very nicely. Then we have the engine parts. On the side, that lifts out on its own. Now we can see that detailing in all its glory. It is very, very nicely done. But now I can clean this and prime it, and then detail paint it, and then the same for this other piece of the engine. Like I said, all the screws on the engine so far have been the same thing. There are these, I think they're about 1/2-inch screws with a flat head on there, and where the tip is flat, not pointed like a sheet metal screw. So those all pull out nicely. And then, oh, there's a third one. It is very nicely designed how they put this together. So there's the rest of the engine. So this fits on there like that. Pretty seamlessly too. That works really well. But this is all one engine here. So now I can have a lot of fun priming, painting this, probably give it a nice dark gunmetal base coat, and then doing all the individual pipes and pieces, and probably even taking like some electrical wire and stuff and adding some extra detailing in there. But this is all ready to be detail painted. And now we have the individual outer engine parts, so we can prime these and get that ready for repainting if that's what somebody wants to do. And that will be what I'm doing. I'm going to have multiple different types of silver on here, because the parts have been replaced time and again. And so I'm going to do the outer shell in a very similar method to like what Adam Savage did on Norm's ship. Is that I want to have, panels picked out rather than having, just an overall silver. I want to pick out certain panels and rust a few pieces, and I've got some aluminum tape that I'm going to be putting down over specific panels to give them a completely different shine to them. And might even have a few panels that are just a completely different color because they were salvaged from other ships that were painted differently. For anyone curious, the inside of the front shroud here has this spacer piece here that goes in the front, and then behind it, here's the front vent, which this definitely needs a painting because that's just a bare plastic. The part on the front is just a pair of clips, so that comes off. So that right there is very nicely done for painting those up separately. So we can put some nice detail and wear in here and on there, and then those will just clip right back together again. Like so. And yeah, it's really easy to reassemble these things again because it's got this big notch here, which fits into the notch on the cowling. So that then does that. The inside of this also need to be painted so it's not just a bare plastic look. But there's a lot that can be done here. The back of this, it's almost like they intended it to be lit and then change their minds. Because, yeah, there's a lot of space in here with this cowling pulled out. And there's just a lot of space to work with. This thing's really big. It's got the orange plastic in there, which I kind of wish it was more of a clear and then just painted, that I can remove the paint. But it's, actually molded in orange. So I'm going to deal with that. I'm going to put some NeoPixel lights in here so that way I can have some variation. And then having a hole here that'll go through into here, and so you can have wiring come through. If somebody was modifying this and really wanted to, I mean, you could have a whole microcontroller setup in just the engine. That's a lot of empty space to work with. There could be batteries and everything inside here. And if you wanted to control it, you can just hide a switch somewhere in the greeblies. Or you can have it to where when you unsnap the wing and pull it out, just have a switch inside here. Hit a switch, snap the wing back on, and then have it going. If you wanted to have it controllable, you could have, you could fit an Arduino Mega in this thing. It is just massive. There's a lot of space to work with. So I'm not sure how I'm going to wind up distributing that space in mine, but knowing that I've got so much room I can work with here, I may have the batteries in the wing units. I'm not sure. But there's options. But yeah, that is how these come apart. So hopefully this will be of use to people out there who are also modifying their Razor Crest chips. Good luck with yours. Hopefully you can get it apart without breaking it and without scarring it up so badly. But this is kind of what happens when you're one of the first people to attempt this. And so there we go. That's all from me.